Laws and regulations are a very important issue to do with accessibility. As we saw previously, most countries in the world belong to the United Nations, and they have to accept, ratify, sign, and establish a protocol to adopt these conventions. At worldwide level, we have the United Nations, and then because we are in Europe, the European Commission, the European Union has also made some European convention that we have to follow. At worldwide level, we have in Article 9 in this convention, it says that to enable persons with disabilities to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life, state parties, that is every country, every state that belongs to the United Nations, shall take appropriate measures to ensure to persons with disabilities access on an equal basis with others to the information and communication, including information and communication technologies and systems, and to other facilities and services open or provided to the public, both in urban and rural areas. In this definition, in fact, is taking into consideration all the issues that we saw in the previous video, where communication is to do with the language, the different languages, the different modalities of the languages, but also with the language distribution. If someone lives in a remote area and has no physical disability, but living in a remote area in itself makes this person into a disabled person because he can't access information. So disability is not to do with physical disabilities or sensorial disabilities or cognitive disabilities. Is to do with any of these issues that stops people from accessing information, which is what this course is about. The other thing that Article 9 says is these measures, which shall include the identification and elimination of obstacles and barriers to accessibility, shall apply to information communication and other services, including electronic services and emergency services. Very important, emergency services, because we must know at all times what's happening in order to be able to leave the house if it is an earthquake, or go unsheltered if it is whatever the condition it is. It should be delivered, this communication, in accessible services, so everybody can access this. The ICT accessibility in the United Nations Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities, which is what we've been seeing in Article 9 and we've saw in the previous video. In the Article 30, it requires state parties to take all appropriate measures to ensure that persons with disabilities enjoy access to television programs and films in accessible formats. And this is the focus of this course. It is to do with television programs, it is to do with movies, cultural content actually, and how we're going to put all this cultural content, which is audiovisual usually, in an accessible format. The United Nations agency, ITU, has created a model ICT accessibility policy report. It is a really interesting publication. It is free of access. You have got down there the web page, the URL where you can contact and download it. And it provides guidelines and legal and regulatory frameworks towards accessibility. It is designed to help countries to develop their own accessibility policies, because one of the things that United Nations does is that it says, as we saw in Article 9 and Article 30, that you had these responsibilities, that you had to do these policies in order to ensure that everybody gets access to information. But it is then up to each country to decide what the policy is going to be, what the protocols are going to be, and what the regulations are going to be. So this publication is quite interesting because it gives you ideas for a framework that you can apply, very practical solutions that you can apply for your country to take on board accessibility policies. The goals of the model policy are to ensure that policymakers consult with persons with disabilities when they develop a policy. It is nothing for us without us motto that should be very much at the heart of this development of accessibility policies. Also is to raise awareness the policy exists. We've already seen in the previous unit that raising awareness is basic when we are developing accessibility services. Also, it is to license service providers to deliver audio description, audio subtitles where appropriate, captioning and signing, and also to train customer services on how to serve customers with disabilities. In fact, this course in itself, it is a course to train about this. And lastly, is to adopt quality of service standards for access services. These are the goals of this model policy that you can consult on the web. And it's a question now. The UN mandate is applicable in some European countries, in all countries belonging to the United Nations or to the USA. And the answer is all countries belonging to the United Nations. We've already seen what is the situation of policymaking in the world with the United Nations and the mandate, and how they should, each country belonging to the United Nations should establish their own protocols. What happens in Europe? In Europe, we don't have mandates, we call them directives. And we have a directive, which is called the Audiovisual Media Service Directive, AVMSD, and it is related to the promotion of accessibility services. All European member states are obliged to encourage media service providers under their jurisdiction to ensure that their services are gradually made accessible to people with a visual or hearing disability. This means that you have to establish your own agenda, your own roadmap on years, or years is the way that usually it is done, and the percentage of the quantity of the content it will be accessible, and also the quality, but we'll talk about quality later. And also this directive, it is the means to achieve accessibility. And the means to achieve accessibility, it is through sign language, subtitling or captioning, audio description, and a very easily understandable menu navigation. In fact, this course that we are doing, this MOOC, is dealing exactly on that. It's got a course on sign language, it's got a unit on subtitling or closed captioning or captioning, it has got a unit on audio description, and in itself, as my colleague Volker explained, it is a good show on how the end user could access and customize the navigation. What are the incentives for the accessibility? While it is difficult to understand that there may be financial incentives, we saw in the previous slide that in fact there are not that many people that they are standard, and there are us users, end users, people. We all have disabilities. Sometimes are visual, sometimes you are deaf, but sometimes you just basically you get old and you get on in life and you can see less and you can hear less. So in fact, offering access content to access in all these different formats, it could be a financially rewarding. Also, you will be harmonizing your legislation with the European Union. Accessibilities and the services are included in must carry obligations, so you should do that in your state country. And it may begin to establish public and private partnerships, because sometimes it is the public broadcaster that needs to offer the services, but it is the private content provider who provides these services. So you establish new partnerships. And it is, of course, very important that you involve all the stakeholders in the value chain in producing and in checking for the quality and in checking for the content. So these are the incentives in establishing the European directive. One of the most important things that is both mentioned by the United Nations and the directive is that you have to develop your own roadmap. The European Commission is not going to say you must do this, but the European Commission is going to say what is the roadmap your state member is going to take on board. Okay, so each state member has his regulator, And the regulator defines the regulations, license conditions, codes of good practice, steps for progressive implementation and of the all access services. So it is the regulator who's going to say, okay, we're going to do, this is the roadmap that we're going to do, and these are the items that we're going to fulfill. So together, the regulator with the licensed service providers and the organizations of people with disabilities, they have to define this roadmap. And they have to prioritize the implementation of different types of programs. You can't just do documentaries, for example, only documentaries, and put the documentaries in the middle of the night accessible. You should have a wide array of programs like news, live programs, emergency, again, very important, emergency services. And they can be pre-recorded, don't have to be live, but also you need to put on air live programs with access services. And the targets maybe differ by the type of the license of the service providers. So again, you have to create, you have to tailor, you have to customize this roadmap to your own type of enterprise. For example, a public broadcaster who receives funding for content development may have greater responsibilities than a commercial service providers. But it has been shown that even the private enterprises are very happy to take on board accessibility services. So this is a common practice now. And of course, content creators. Content creators is a very important link in the value chain. It's a important stakeholder because value chains are complex. Licensed services and providers may not get the people to develop the content, so they will need somebody else to develop the content for them. Licensed services providers can promote accessibility in their content acquisition, in their programming and editorial policies as part of the content producers' packages. So it would be very important if the content creators start accessibility in their production, because then the whole value chain will then respect it and reproduce it. So it is very, very, very important that content creators take on board accessibility, media accessibility. Some items that you may take consideration when establishing targets in the annual report for your roadmap for accessibility will be the percentage of programming with audio description and subtitling or captioning that you would have. The awareness steps, are you going to create a logo? Are you going to advertise it? The use of icons in the interaction with the end user, with the screen, with your television programming service, the EPG. The accessible and emergencies announcements. Will you have some already programmed, already recorded that you can then release when the occasion arises? And the standards for accuracy and synchronization, you should develop some sort of quality benchmarking that you're going to apply in your own service. These are some of the targets, some ideas of the targets that you may have for the annual report. And again, ITU, the agency from the United Nations, has developed two different reports that can be a great help. The first one is the Making TV Accessible report. You can download it, and it is, again, free, and identify ways in which television can be made more accessible. And the other one is Making More Mobile Phones Services Accessible. And again, there are loads of very practical ways and very practical comments on how to make mobile phone services accessible in itself. Another question. The question is, media accessibility is a human right, is a user-centric methodology, or is it a policy guideline? And the answer is, media accessibility is a human right.